safely go back to their work areas. It's all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Executive session. I would. Okay, thank you very much, Delegate Nazareth. Recognized guests and visiting officials. Thank you very much to everyone who's here. Number 3, purpose of the work session: review audit findings identified in the implications and discussion of planned corrective action utilizing input from each affected division toward the elimination of future findings and repeat findings. I see we have the controller. And what programs are you guys from?
I'm with the Borough office. I'm from Jalen.
Okay. So that's one of the findings, right?
Yes.
Did we contact any of the other programs?
Yes. You know,
Number 6.
someone.
Reports, audit exceptions identified, presenter Sean McCabe, controller, officer, controller of the various programs / department program / department / division managers. B, proposed amendments, presenters, members of the committee, office of legislative council, office of management budget, and office of control, and others. Proposed amendments, calendar, and 5, close of session for announcements, adjournment, and we'll have our next regular meeting. It is not in Kahajule, it is going to be at NDOT.
It's an end or here.
It's at NDOT. At 10 a.m. Okay, we'll go to item 4A, controller. You know, this meeting is on a public line and it is being streamed. So if and when you need to discuss things that are privileged, then that are related to the audit, we'll resolve ourselves into executive session.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair, and Chair for the meeting, Delegate Slater. So, we probably need to go into executive session here shortly, but just to update, as you all know, we went through the audit findings in executive session a couple weeks ago. I do have some updates for the committee based on conversations I've had with KPMG. They're encouraging based on what we reported last time. So, and since then, I know the committee had asked that we get the division directors together to talk about the findings and the corrective action plans for each one of the divisions that have affected. I was able to meet with some of them yesterday. As you know, Delegate Slater and Ms. Nakai, we were at the investment committee meeting pretty much all day, but I did step out for about 30 minutes and I did talk to some of the directors about this meeting and the corrective action plans going forward. What I communicated to them is, you know, the Budget and Finance Committee wanted to hear from each director that the findings affected on plans to help mitigate or eliminate findings this year for next year. It is important to note that, you know, we're just now starting to get this audit wrapped up. However, we're less than 90 days away from the end of the next audit period. So it is important that we, I know we have a busy schedule with budget coming up, but it is important that we give some attention to the findings because as I said, we're less than 90 days away from the end of the next audit period and the whole audit process will start over again. So with that, Delegate Slater, if the committee has any general questions, I can answer. Otherwise, I would recommend going into executive session so we could go through the updates and the findings and the comments from the directors that are present.
Committee members on the line and in the room, do you have any questions of a general nature?
How long will we go to executive session?
Pardon?
How long? If this is all we got.
Do you have any advisement on that?
I guess just depending on how long the programs speak, 5 minutes apiece, maybe,
13, say an hour.
yeah, an hour.
Start with an hour. This is a work session, so it's not the same rules for a committee meeting. It's committee meeting, you do have to identify definitely how long you're going to do the executive session, work session. But we'll start with an hour. Are we able to set up another Zoom line?
I'm not speaking to IT help, or unless the proposed office has a number of following.
Not sure. I think we do, but I'm not sure the details.
Go off record to get that line secured.
Yeah, I mean, I can. So it's fine if we have the other programs on, or you only want to have one program at a time.
No, it's probably good to hear the programs here. Yeah. Unless it's technologically better to have them one at a time.
That would be more. Just try and make some right now, and I'll send it to Peggy. Now it's. Okay, committee members and those in the room are now out of the executive session. Is there any further discussion on item 4A? Hearing none, we'll move to item 4B, which is proposed amendments. And the presenters are the members of the committee, the Office of Legislative Counsel, the Office of Management and Budget, and the Office of the Controller and others. Proposed amendments calendar, so. The chair has it where the members of the committee will speak first, so. I'll open the floor to members of the committee at this time. We have any discussion? Hearing none, Office of Legislative Counsel. Do you want to present on the proposed amendments?
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem, Mr. Vice Chair. I have been in email communication with Honorable Chair Parrish. And we were discussing who should present first. I don't know if she's available via Zoom at this point. She did have her own recommendations, and I told her maybe before age, so she can present first. So I don't know if you got that message.
She's not here, and I don't think she'll be slow, so. If. Well, I guess I kind of think of amendments as clean like legislation. And so like, you shouldn't be sharing who would sponsor the minutes or really the content of stuff without their permission. So unless a committee member is going to volunteer and discuss their proposal, are these amendments or is this just the red line of event?
What I'm passing out right now is OLC's recommended edits to the strike through and underlined version that's posted on DIB. That's attached to legislation 0142-23. What we did at OLC was we took that strike through underlined version and we put it into a clean version so that we didn't have to do strike throughs and underlines to a strike through underline version, which would have been too confusing. So we took the version again, posted on DIB, turned it into a clean document, and then made our recommended edits to that clean document. And that's what you'll see here.
How is that reflected in terms of your recommendation? Do you have a schedule that shows here's where we change things, or
the strike through and underline shows the strike throughs show what's deleted, and the underline shows what's in the new language. And this is just
and that is only from the Office of Legislative Counsel, or the strike throughs and underlines are inclusive of the updates that OMB did?
no, this is just from Legislative Counsel, and it's just to the version that's posted with the legislation. So if you take that strike through version that's posted on DIB and clean it, make it a clean version, then we went ahead and did strike throughs and underlines to that. So that's what this is.
Okay. Committee members, how would you like to proceed?
For the chair,
Yes.
my question is, so this is just a cleaned up version, there is no suggested, well, okay, my question, two questions, one. The cleaned up, were you referencing as a cleanup version to the BIM manual, the strikeouts, cleaned it up and everything? Is there any specific amendments in here that are, that OLC has made recommendations that are not in the legislation that is on or with that's posted in DIB? That's my question. Chair. To officers like council. So
Can you clarify that again? Are there edits or? Because I mean, everything that's in here that's underlined is an edit to the one that's posted, and everything that's stricken out is an edit as well, so this would have to be an amendment to the legislation.
I know, but were these, okay, let me clarify that first. Are these recommendations coming from Office of Legislative Council, or is this a working document that's coming from OMB, Controller's Office, other entities too as well that have made these recommendations? Thank you.
Mr. Pike,
Thank you, Honorable Delegate Damon. So, during the presentation of the BIM from Mr. Bial with OMB, my understanding from him is that the strike-through underlined version that was attached to the legislation 014 that was dropped is a version showing changes to last year's BIM for FY23, and that OMB and DOJ and OC participated in preparing that strike-through version. Okay, so starting last week, myself and another support staff lady at Office of Legislative Council assisted me. And we took the strike-through version, again, that's attached to the legislation, and we converted that to a clean version, as if there were no strike-throughs and underlines, okay?
Okay.
So that is what is proposed by OMB and whoever OMB worked with. I don't have specific names as to who they worked with. I thought that they had worked with Mr. McCabe. However, he has since sent me his separate comments that are new comments. But I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm not sure the exact individuals who work with. I believe he worked with Mel Lewis from DOJ. Anyhow, so that's that version. So then OLC took that, cleaned it up, and got a clean version of that. And then OLC made changes to that clean version. And that is what you're seeing here. This is just OLC changes. And so this is what we recommend to the committee. Okay.
with his input.
I have not had a chance to insert Mr. McCabe's input. However, I have written every single point down in marker here so that as we go through this document, I will speak to his points. I will raise them as we get to that subsection. I've looked thoroughly at the document. He emailed me with his particular comments, and I will bring all of those up so that all of his points are addressed. I didn't have time to incorporate those into this, so I apologize for that.
Delegate Tatum, does that answer your question? Or you need more?
Well, I think throughout the presentation, I'll get some more information. And I guess the question, going back to your initial comments, Madam Chair, is who's, if anybody has sponsored this, or if anybody's recommended to sponsor this, and I think that Office of Legislative Council is just coming back to answer what was reiterated off the last meetings, or specifically last Monday meeting. And these are the recommendations that are coming out and bringing forth. I guess my question back to Office of Legislative Council's body is, has OMB looked at this revised document? And is there any other further recommendations from OMB since that revised document, or is it something that because you're saying you're getting this information specifically from OMB's recommendations? So I guess that's my final question.
So they reviewed what you revised? No.
No, if I may. So this version is, again, a strike through and underlying version to a cleaned up version of what's posted on DIB. So now this is only Office of Legislative Council's changes. However, some of these changes are based on the comments that were made at the previous work session, BSC's work session on June 26th. So some of the comments there I wrote and I took notes and whatnot, and so I incorporated some of those concerns, and I also put in questions in this document saying, we should discuss this, or, because I need further guidance from the committee as to what exactly how exactly the committee would like to change a particular provision. So no, OMB, DOJ, OOC have not reviewed it. I believe Mr. McCabe has, but I sent this out at like 5:40 this morning. So that's when they got it. So I have not heard back from them. I did get an email from Mel and he was asking a couple of questions, so I know he's looking at it. But other folks, I did not get any response from other folks at this point.
Thank you.
So you're hearing? Okay, committee members, how would you like to proceed? Do you want to go page by page? Do you want to read this? Do you want to? Yeah, yes, tell you guys are wrong.
Just a comment. I think we've gone through this same thing like we're going right now again. We're just adding, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna bring this up again and say, why can't we put all the changes in it before we even go through this? And when they put the changes in, maybe they red ink or something, so we know. But the changes are gonna go through, just like we're talking about, man. He's gonna put it, he's gonna stop it, red, and there might be a disagreement from controller or Mr. Brielle when he looks at it again, so they all just sit down. You want a version of it?
Thank you, Delegate Hazard. Committee member, anything else? Okay, I think the point Delegate Hazard is raising is, everybody just got it this morning, we just got it right now, but are there gonna be, okay, if you go to page whatever and it says a BR to a different object code within the same business unit shall be verified by OSC before submitting transfer to OMB. I don't know. And then without processing. I mean, it looks like a lot of this is just cleaning up some language, like, so it's more elegant and understandable. But I can't. I need time. I personally need time to read this, the changes. But do you envision there being any conflict because there have been substantive edits or amendments, Mr. Body?
Thank you, Honorable Sayer. I spoke with Mr. Bial on the phone directly a couple of days ago, and I had told him that we worked on preparing a clean version, which we did, and that I was taking some of the recommendations from that June 26th work session and trying to make those edits, and that I was also going to do some edits to the document. And you are absolutely correct that I don't understand a lot of these concepts. I did not try to change things in a substantive matter. And if there was a question that I had about something, for example, IDC is actually general funds, but it's considered external funds. So which object code do you use for that? Something like that. There's a chart of object codes, and then you have an IDC over here that's defined. But in the definition of IDC, it doesn't say use object code 1 or use object code 6. It doesn't say which object code to use. And in the chart of object codes, there's no line or column for IDC use object code X, or so when I had a question like that, I reached out to Mr. McCabe and he answered my email and he clarified some things for me. And I reached out to Mr. Bial as well. Mr. McCabe said, well, as far as which object code, that's for OMB to answer. Unfortunately, I have received no response from Mr. Bial to my emails. So, I have not, if you take a look at, what I wrote in here, I didn't insert anything. I simply put under the special code, you know, where the different funds are talked about in here. There's a section on different funds, special funds. Let's see, I'm gonna find that page right now here. Okay, on page 10, where it says fund allocations. Instead of putting in IDC is object code 1 or whatever, because I don't know and I haven't got an answer from Mr. Beal. I simply put at the top of there, I said, check with OMB and insert fund type codes for all of these. Or put fund type codes in the definition. So when someone reads general fund, they can read it and see that that goes under fund type code 1. Or IDC goes under fund type code, you know, whatever. So that's all I did was sort of put a note to myself that it would be good to insert that, but I need to check with OMB. So that's kind of how I was doing it, was, you know, reaching out via email if the question came up. But I really refrained as much as I could from doing something substantive. And of course, I think you should discuss this with Mr. McCabe to, you know, get his opinion on that. But Honorable Chair Slater, what you said about sort of making things a little bit shorter and easier to read, that was my goal, was to take convoluted sentences, things like that were difficult to read, and to try to condense it and make it much more simple to understand. That was mainly my goal throughout the document.
Thank you, Mr. Potty. So I think Delegate Ashley, there's no big changes where someone's gonna throw their arms up, and there has been an opportunity for some review. The main thing seems to be that IDC. You'll get your answer soon. I mean, that is, it doesn't matter what I say, I can give my answer, but. Committee members? Well, I think, I don't know, let's just see how much more we're gonna get for a second. Since there aren't big substantive changes, I mean, if you read the BIM, then we understand this. So I think it's really in the committee's court right now as to whether you want to propose any amendments to the budget instruction manual or discuss issues related to the budget instruction manual that we want to cover now. Mr. Vine.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a second. Is there any discussion? No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do think it is very important, since we have Mr. McCabe here. I do think it's important to go to his, there were questions and points that he raised with respect to some of the substantive provisions in the BIM. He does have several very good points tonight that I think we should talk about.
These are ones that he emailed to you or something?
Yes, he emailed, he actually, I don't know how you did this. I don't know how to do it. I want somebody to teach me. He took the PDF of the thing and he put in little yellow boxes here and there on the PDF, and you click them and it gives his question.
Okay, let's. Do you guys want to order lunch, or do you want to keep going and then get lunch after this? I guess Blake's is the option. Sandwich, we'll get it.
Yeah, they said, yeah.
Yeah, okay. You said Blake's?
Yes.
Okay, don't drink it with me, I'll get some. Mr. Pye, do you want to present those questions, or do you want the controller to present those questions, or?
Whatever the committee preferred. I read through his entire email and I made marks right exactly where his marks were in the email. So if we go page by page, I can bring up those questions if you would like.
Yeah, let's go to the first section.
Okay.
That you think is relevant and.
Okay. All right, starting on page 2, Mr. McCabe raised a question about capital expenditures. Capital expenditures means the spending of money on a CIP, and then CIP is itself defined, capital improvement project. Mr. McCabe's question is this, I'm assuming, is this definition consistent with our audit report? That's what I got from your question.
Yeah.
And I do think we should know that answer. We should know. And if we need to change the definition, you'll let
You know this one.
okay.
Wait a second.
This is the same definition we have.
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. So I did get a chance to read pretty much the entire bill. And as Mr. Pahi mentioned, made some comments. And so what page is that coming?
Page two.
Of the paper document, I just read.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Page 2.
It may not be page 2 of the one you did. It's page 2 of the paper version that we just gave you.
Oh, okay.
So pages on that.
There's our churches. Yeah, that's what churches are what.
Get you a chicken sandwiches, starting chicken, what's on Waterbury or from churches? Or churches. Chicken strip, that's.
Oh.
We can involve ourselves into executive session. We have to go back into it to discuss. Oh.
Okay.
Very contentious.
Yeah.
You want me to?
Yeah, you ready to go?
I think so. Oh, okay. So, is it, are you ready, Willie?
Yeah.
Okay, so, the first question that I asked is, we define, capital expenditures of anything greater than 5,000 or more with the useful life of over 1 year. However, I just asked if that's consistent with our audit report, because let me kind of speak to what that says. Well, there's a definite, so I don't think this one is a major BIM issue. I just want to make sure that whatever our capitalization policy is that's reported in our audit report is consistent with this 5,000, because I think we actually go higher than that on the audit report. And it's one of those departures from GAAP that they told me about. So, you know, I do have a general comment. Does it have material effect on this BIM? I don't think so, but I think it's something we can address, you and I, before they approve it. This first one about capital expenditures.
I think, we should settle the language now.
Okay,
That's what I think we should do, because we're here with the meetings.
okay.
Arvin?
Thank you, Chair. The question to Mr. McKay, is this a threshold question?
It's just the definition that we have in the BIM. I don't know if it's consistent with our financials. Hold on off a bit.
Does this, this impacts the inventory?
Okay,
If it's a lower threshold, then you have a lot of inventory out there.
well, no, I actually think it's higher, but
And if it's a
Is
higher,
there like a differentiation between like if it's some sort of construction of something that's over 100 or 50 and this is 5?
yeah, no, actually, it's 5, so I think this one's good.
Okay. Let's keep moving. Lorraine?
So
It's
we're
good.
good on,
Yeah,
okay,
it's good.
great, okay. Okay, so the next one is on page 3. External funds, number 16, external funds towards the bottom. Mr. McCabe's question is, grants are made from UUFB.
Oh, yeah. So, thank you. This in general is part of the questions that we've had. Really stemming from the NTU and Dene College funding, where we made, they're not really, I mean, I guess they are grants, but they're Navajo Nation awards to outside, and there's a whole section in the BIM that discusses Navajo Nation grants. The problem we ran into with Navajo Tech and with Dene College and Phoenix Indian Center was they ran into an administrative issue. The encumbrance didn't happen, and so all of their money got reverted to UUFB as part of the general fund. My question is, should we, those, from an accounting standpoint, those monies are restricted for a certain use, meaning the council made a resolution at some point in time, said these monies, these dollars are restricted for the use of Navajo Tech, Phoenix Indian Center, Dene College, and I think it's Navajo Prep. I can't remember the fourth one. So should those revert to UUFB and treated as general funds, or should they be restricted and almost treated as external funds, therefore carrying forward every year? Because now we're running into problems having to go back for a UUFB request to get funding that's already been approved through a prior resolution to the council. So really the question I'm asking here is, in the case of grants made particularly by the council to unrelated entities like North Navajo Tech, should those be restricted and treated as external, therefore being able to roll forward and as a carry forward? Or do we continue saying, if NTU doesn't use it, it reverts back to UFB, then they have to go through the whole process of getting UFB? My opinion on that is those are restricted because you guys put a specific use to them, and they should almost be treated like an external funding source, meaning it's just like the federal government making a grant to us saying you need to use it for this purpose. We're making a grant out to NTU, Dene College, et cetera, saying you need to use it for this specific purpose. Right now, the process is that all reverts back to UFB. And I'm now having to work with legislative council with Dr. Nez helping on an effort to try and release those funds back out of UFB when they've already been appropriated at some point in time. So that's the reason why I brought that.
For NTU and Net College, those are supposed to be a part of that set aside off the top. And so, I know with the Indian Center. And the last one was now.
September 30th hit, they lost it. Now we're having to go back and trying to give it to them.
Yeah, well, the Indian Center stuff is a little more complicated.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what the nation's going to decide to give in general at this point. So do you have recommended language or really on this?
I basically just raised the question, but we can work on language. Essentially, my recommendation is if Navajo appropriates money, it's restricted, right? Like, we can't, OOC can't rob that account and say, oh, NTU didn't use it, so we're gonna go get it through UFB. It should be restricted in the general fund. That's really all I'm trying to make the distinguish it. Because from an accounting standpoint, it is.
Committee members, so you brought up 4 specific instances of entities. You want to have something that is a general rule that's applicable, because I mean, you could have the Division of Social Services decide they want to do a grant program. The council decides to fund it, and then they don't fulfill the program within the fiscal year. To me, that's different than Net College and NTU not getting their money that the nation has decided they're supposed to because of administrative mishaps. So there's creating a general rule, or there's saying maybe these 4 instances or 3 instances. Or just 2, will create a, I don't know, you said we would restrict the funds so that they can't be returned to the UFB.
Yeah.
Do you have ideas? I mean, I'm of the mindset for Net College into, those are statutory set asides, right? And so we should clarify in advance that should be restricted from reversion into the general fund. For Navajo Prep and the Indian Center, that's to me less about conversion, more about other things. So should we include language to say that set aside are restricted from reverting to the general UFB?
I mean, what I'm talking about is, okay. The internal process is something that's. The problem isn't us improving it, it's an internal process. That's holding it up and getting it done, so. In hindsight, the question then is. If it's gonna be restricted, I do agree with you, Mr. Chair. The way that you explained it.
So that even if we goof up, the money's still there.
It's still there, and it should
And then they'll
be.
go process it.
Yeah.
So Laura, you understand that?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I just need to be clear though, if you're talking about only UUFB money, because there's all kinds of, allocations from other funds, from.
I'm talking only about the set asides for NTU and Net College.
Now, if there's a specific though, like, let's say. For example, the state medical special ed. SMAs, but that's different. I gotta consider that different, that's one of the things, so.
So you're saying don't restrict that, or you're saying do restrict
I think I think that would be. Okay, now does that? I think when council approves that resolution. That specific, there's sometimes there's specific languages in there that are different from the directive that the BIM states. And if that is signed into law, passed by council, signed into law, then that is a different approach.
So you're saying you're comfortable with entities outside of those two that have a set aside? Will handle on legislation by legislation basis?
I mean, sometimes they do go and they do. I mean, if anything changes, it would be up into leadership to make that decision and put that into the legislation.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm not that, so that's.
But I don't think that we should put anything in there else in there, because like, if we allocate to, if we're expanding that scope, then I don't think that the allocation to like from citizens be identified in there to have no bidding. Like, see what, just taking, for example, CAP that certified that contain legislation. There's numerous amount of projects in there that we haven't expended, and if we put that in there, then those dollars could possibly, we'd have to go back to the council resolution to bring those dollars and put them back into the citizen funds. But, and I think that's a correct way that those dollars are specifically for other outside entities, whether that be the citizen, land trust fund. Any of our other trust fund dollars.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm just suggesting that she specifically writes out NTU Jeanette College set asides are restricted from reversion to the UFB and not touch anything else.
What else is there though? Is there anything else? Did we still give money to that little, that preschool in Navajo?
I remember drafting the legislation.
On an annual basis in the budget? Do we give out what other entities that are in our regular budget? There's other entities besides that, those two.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, these are great questions. I just wanted to quickly bring up the resolution that was passed by council in January. The most recent amendment to the original source. One, all funds from general fund, from the general fund that are appropriated in the comprehensive budget. And two, all UUFB money that's appropriated in a supplemental appropriation. And then the second section to that is notwithstanding, chapter money does not revert as long as they budget it for the same purpose in the next year. And then another provision, the lapse and reversion of all funds appropriated outside of the comprehensive budget and all non-UUFB funds shall be governed, the reversion and the lapse shall be governed by the particular statute governing those funds or by the council resolution that approved those funds. And this cannot be waived except by a 7/8 vote of the council. So that was passed in January. So I think whatever the funding source, we look, if it's non-UUFB, we look to see what the statutory provision, if there's a lapsing provision in the statute for that fund, or we look at the council resolution that approved the money for whatever project using whatever special fund monies. And as far as general fund and UUFB, they lapse at the end of the fiscal year, according to this resolution.
Okay, well, I mean, we're familiar with that legislation, but what is your point? on Jeanette College and to you.
I'm just wanting to make sure that we're consistent with whatever language we put into them has to be consistent with that.
So then. The logical next step would be if. NTO Jeanette College are treated as set asides before the branch planning allocations, right, of the. Of assigning the bin and the planning allocations. Because they're part of that education line item, I think, in our set aside, so. Are they treated as a general fund dollar, and if so, then it seems like you need to set in place the requirement for the authorize. That in one reading, or. They could be treated as a general fund dollar. And you are restricting them. From the version without obligating them. I don't know if that's possible, because there's this term restricted funds, like. To me, it's like there's restrictions in the statute that establish them, which supposed to be made available every year. And you're trying to impose something that says, well, no, they're supposed to revert back every year, then there's conflicting language in the statute. And the third thing is, no, they're not a general fund dollar at all. They're set aside from the revenues and they're treated over here as something else. That's a set aside. And even though you do budget for the budgeting process, they are. Just like a special revenue, a different type of money. So do you want to do that more, or do you have an idea?
I would defer to Mr. McCabe and the committee,
What?
I think it's general funds, but.
It's being treated as general funds right now, because it lapsed, that's what we're being told. So,
It's good that happened, doesn't mean I think it's right.
no, I agree, and that's what I'm trying to do, is make sure the language is consistent and says. With the exception of restrict, because, from an accounting standpoint, not from a budget standpoint, just accounting. When council says, here's a statute or resolution awarding this year-to-year money to NTU or whoever. We're required to restrict that, meaning I can't rate it as a program, they can't, it's for NTU and that's what it's for. So I'm just trying to figure out how that definition of accounting definition of restricted general funds fits into the bin when it comes to automatic reversion of the UFP. My thought is those monies should always carry forward because there's a restricted purpose. Whether we could even treat them, I guess, as external funds at some point, but one way or the other, there are certain situations when council makes a resolution or statute to award funds. That those are restricted for a purpose and shouldn't go back to UFP. Because we run a danger of rating the UFB and now there's no money for NTU, right? Or whoever.
And it's probably OLC's duty, and I've been cognizant of this issue where we ask the delegate. Do you want a reversion provision? If the statutory source of the funds doesn't have its own statutory provision section. If it doesn't say, then we say, okay, honorable delegate so-and-so, do you want a reversion date? Or do you want it to never revert? And then that can actually be put in the resolution. And then that fits with what I just read, that funds that are not general fund or UFB will go according to what the resolution says. But then, okay, so then the question is, does this NPU money constitute general fund money?
I think that's how it's being treated.
Yeah, and so how do we call it something else?
Restricted general.
Restricted general.
Call it restricted general fund?
That's probably the proper accounting term, yeah, it's.
So should that be a definition,
Yeah,
a new definition?
that's what I think.
Okay, that sounds good.
I don't know if you have them for.
Okay, so whole piece.
Okay.
So you'll work on that, because that seems. Identifying the definition. You guys understand? Yeah, is that okay with you?
Okay, I've read that.
So what's the next,
Let's see.
Mr. Chair Pro Tem, this is Mel.
you have good news for us, Mel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Pro Tem. and good morning, everyone. Just going back to the issue of funds not lapsing for Navajo Nation grants. Another way to handle it would be, instead of trying to reclassify the funds, the BIM could direct OMB to set up the budgets as project budgets instead of annual budgets, because project budgets won't lapse. The funds won't lapse for that. And then I'm not sure exactly how this would work. Maybe controller could tell me, but just treating the grants as an open commitment.
Yeah, we could.
I wanted to say, a little bit. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, I don't know on which end it went out, but can you just restate everything you just said? Because we only heard open commitment at the end. And I want the committee to get the benefit of everything you said.
Oh, sorry, Chair. I was saying that instead of reclassifying the funds for Navajo Nation grants as something other than general funds, the BIM could say that OMB should set up grant budgets as project budgets instead of annual budgets, and to treat the grant as an open commitment, so that at the end of the fiscal year, the funds are committed in FMIS, and funds that have an open commitment don't lapse, is my understanding. Maybe Mr. Bayal and controller could add to that.
Yeah.
Controller gave a thumbs up.
No, I actually think the language of committed is better than restricted, actually, now that I think about it.
So we don't need to add any definition or anything, just.
Well, unless there's a committed in here somewhere. So really, we're just replacing restricted with the word committed. I think that word's actually better.
But you do need to add language in there to say that.
To be consistent with what he said, because committed funds, open commitments don't lapse.
Yeah.
So
Okay, so I do a new definition of
committed
funds.
that don't lapse according to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also the way that is.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Rhodes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering what Mr. Bayal thinks about making a grant budget a project budget instead of an annual budget. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Rodas, Budget and Finance Committee, we can follow the same concept, meaning like a project many times covers more than one particular fiscal year. Because being a project, it's usually building something that goes over a year, 2, sometimes 3. So I'm not sure we would, in this instance, if we would call it project, but it would be the same thought, the same intent, the same concept. So controller and our attorneys, if they agree, then that could be done.
Project budget,
Well,
is that the term? And then define it as committed, funds committed to the project regardless of expiration of fiscal year or whatever.
I think that's the idea, because Mr. Rodas said open commitments don't lapse. So we want to try and fit that in there, because
Okay,
really they are committed and they shouldn't go back to UFB because they're kind of set aside.
okay, so can I use the term project budget? Will that work, Mr. Bial?
But I'm uncomfortable with that. They're not projects. I mean, it's getting into like. It should be a one-time grant. It should be like, oh, you have a drawdown schedule and all this stuff. But the open commitment thing, yeah.
Well, they do, well, in NTU and Diné College's, case in particular, they do draw down, that's cost reimbursement. So,
Is it, do they have caps or is it just like, okay, we provided you $700,000 worth of receipts or whatever?
that's how,
It's just whatever they got.
there's a report that comes out and then we,
So it's not a lump sum given to them upfront.
no, I was actually suggesting maybe we do it that way, but, you know, if we can resolve the reversion part, then I think the rest of it is fine. Meaning it doesn't automatically revert, or,
They always solve it, or are there instances where they don't solve
well, they haven't got it for 2 years for one, but I don't know prior to that. And really, all I'm trying to do is create a mechanism that, so we don't have to go back through another process. I'm just trying to, again,
it? I guess the point is if they use, the reason I asked, if they use all the money every year, then we just give them all.
I mean,
We're gonna hide it.
They're not gonna use it.
Coffee can.
we could still
Let's not
not,
deal with that right now,
yeah, okay.
but. Three members, do you have guidance on this project budget versus after we're away from restricted general funds now? And I'm comfortable with you guys can hang out the language.
Okay.
I'm getting intense.
Okay. Just for now, sort of stick a pin in it, project budget, but we'll change it, we'll fix it to
Yeah,
sound it.
Yeah.
Okay.
committed general fund, yeah.
Money, something like that. Okay. Great, thank you.
And I think as a mechanism, you guys should, I'm just a suggestion for OLC. Still ask the question, are these gonna be committed? Because then it fits the definition and we won't have to lapse.
And we may or may not put words in the legislation with
Right.
respect to that. Okay,
Okay.
okay, sounds good. Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next item on page 4. Oh, fixed costs. Mr. McCabe asked, does this definition need to be looked at? And I'm assuming you're talking about chapter official stipends, which is not really a fixed cost. So,
Well, that one we can probably push down to the next, because the general question came up, I think, in the very first 3-branch chief meeting. Is should we look to redefine what fixed costs mean? So that was just a general comment. We can probably wait for the next budget cycle and fix the definition.
okay, may I ask what did we decide on raising official stipends? They're not included in this, or should it be included in this?
I don't know, Dominic, do you know?
At the moment, they're not in here.
That is.
Okay,
Can we, but you do have the language in there that says it does include chapter official stipends.
Yeah.
Can you put raising official stipends in there? Yeah, you have to issue that.
Working on. Trying to get that done. For grading official language and on board.
All three different, but can you put all the. Right.
Yeah.
Next architecture, just that one.
raising officers, landlord. Members, members, farm board members, and that's it, those 3.
Mr. Chair,
Well, that was,
We need to calculate that, and then we never got the breakdown of 4.158. But, is that Mel?
yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, to Mr. Pahi on this issue, land board, farm board, and district grazing official members, their payments are processed through the Department of Agriculture, not through chapters, and so that's in the Department of Ag budget. So, I mean, obviously the committee could treat that as a fixed cost, and that the funding would still flow through DNR and Department of Ag, but it wouldn't be funding that would go to chapters. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So. We'll leave that calculation for Wednesday. I think. Would be great if there's something we can do, but. Yes, Peggy, can you note that that's one of the things we'll need to send over to the executive branch, that calculations for Wednesday.
You're right there.
Land board. This has the farm board and the land board and all that stuff.
Well, the question from Monday was the grazing. The grazing officials. So. The way I understand it, it is the grazing officials, land boards, and farm boards.
Yes.
And last year, the executive branch and more particularly, the BNF committee and council amended the fixed costs to include the chapter stipends at this level to cover the mandatory meetings for those officials. And in order to ensure its continuance, it was put into the fixed cost, and the fixed cost definition was amended to incorporate that.
Yeah, that's a track. So we want to do the same thing for those 3 other entities. Would you be able to help us get that information for Wednesday? Or who do you think the appropriate entity is? We just like calling them into it.
The 3 entities are,
Well, it'd all be through the Department of Ag, like you said. Yes, land board, farm board, grazing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we can verify with them if they're already in here. My assumption and understanding is they are. Because remember, as an example, grazing committees are primarily on the main Navajo reservation. Eastern Agency and a lot of New Mexico don't have grazing committees. They have land boards. But they're essentially the same thing, and they get paid the same way. But we can verify that, as you say, Vice Chair Slater, and we'll let you know if there's any, discrepancy about it.
Yeah, because I just have these recollections of like Western Agency grazing officials, Central at one point. And we had to go back and get supplementary applications because they weren't budgeted.
Yeah.
And it just seems silly.
Right. You're exactly right. Up to last year, there was a chronic problem with underfunding. You see, that's where the planning allocations that you're going to discuss, hopefully very soon. The amounts that go to chapters and to DCB, they have to decide how to allocate it to meet their priorities as best they can. And so what DCB is going to say is that we don't have enough funds to fund chapter stipends, was the example, fully. So they only would budget therefore for 9-10 months out of the year. And sooner or later, a supplemental will come to provide the balance necessary. So the council will always say, right, that's, how come executive doesn't fund it? at the appropriate level. So finally, again, as of last year, it has been funded at 100%.
So you're here.
Thank you. Okay. With this grading, though, farming, though, landfill, if there was an issue with the farm board that were in the red. They were getting a stuff, manual and our land board on these things, like they were okay. There was an issue. That came up, that the farm board didn't get paid, weren't getting paid, because they were short of funds, right? How did that happen? They're given allocation the same amount of money. Just to clarify that, if they're all the same, they're getting the same allocation, how do they, get in the red?
Mr. Real?
Yeah.
Mr. Real?
They'll begin, speaking to your question. When we, we're double checking on these numbers, the amount and so on. This particular budget page that I'm looking at with the 4.1 million. It's calculated based on fiscal year 23, but the same amount would be provided for fiscal year 24. So in discussion with DNR last week, when we were double checking as best we could the fixed cost allocations, more specifically the Navajo generating station transmission costs. I asked DNR subsequently, what about the land boards, farm boards, and grazing committees? And the answer I got, but obviously we need to further double check it. But the answer I got is the land boards, farm boards, and grazing committees are adequately funded. It's just the internal processing, the norm, getting the documentation required to pay all of these members in a timely way. That's the answer I got, but we'll double check before next Wednesday.
I mean, that's definitely the case, we know that. There are those internal issues, and we had, that directive from Delegate Daniels, not about 5 or 6 weeks ago. I guess my thought of having the board members be a part of the fixed costs is it just kind of gives you a better picture of the budget. So it like truly beats the definition of fixed costs, like it doesn't change. Are we ready to move on? Literally,
Yes.
what do we have next?
Before we move on, I just need to know if, I guess we'll decide whether to add these 3 to the step definition of fixed cost.
4 of us here want to do it.
Okay, we'll add it. Make that change, I'll make that clear, okay,
Well, I'm not going to join it. It's all.
okay, great, I will do that. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next item is on the same page, a little bit down. Let's see. Mr. McCabe said under indirect costs, we said. I don't know if this is a question or just a comment, but he can clarify. Mr. McCabe said direct costs are direct federal expenditures. IDC or costs spent for individual purposes benefiting more than one external funding source that the general fund recovers. or is reimbursed with costs of administering external funds on behalf of others. I think his emphasis appears to be maybe, if I'm right, inserting federal money, make it clear that IDC's, it's always federal money, right?
Right.
Okay,
I think, yeah, I think in general, just, I mean, it doesn't really, this one again won't materially change a whole lot. I just wanted to make sure that we understand that our IDC rate, that's negotiated with IDC, it's based primarily on federal funds,
I'll do it.
right?
Well, I was gonna say, I
Make it more clear to do that.
was gonna say it includes state funds too.
The rate does. We don't charge a rate to the state funds. Do we? All right, if I may.
Yeah, Mr. Wood.
Chair, member of the committee, question on. IBC, on which funds are those collected? It's primarily federal fund. IDC is a federal requirement through OMB, it used to be OMB Circular A87, now it's through CFR Part 200. So in the budget instruction manual, there's a provision that says that IDC has to be included in the application for federal grants. But on non-federal grant, state, county, it's optional. If those entities allow it, then include. If they don't allow it, that's just the way it goes.
So maybe the definition doesn't need to change. I just was trying to make a distinguish between federal and non-federal.
I'll
Because,
do that.
yeah, primarily it's federal.
Right, I'll do that. I'll insert the word federal, but I'll do that. Great. Okay. Cute.
Okay.
Okay, so the next item. I did have a question, should branches and chapters be included in the, it talks about. Under IDC, all nomination programs receiving external funds must include IDC in the contract or grant agreement funding award. Provided if the entity providing the funds allows for IDC recovery. And then I just said should branches and chapters be included. Maybe that's not a relevant question, but
Well. Chapters are under.
Yeah, they're, if they.
Is that you, Mel?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my screen froze. I didn't hear what was just asked. Could you repeat that, please?
All right, so we just heard a noise and we didn't know. If someone was trying to speak and if it was you, then it got fixed.
No, that wasn't me. Sorry.
So the question of chapters and branches is your question, right?
yes,
Yeah.
it may be a silly question, but I thought I'd put it in there.
Which number were you on? Yeah.
I'm still on CDC,
Well, there's 3 different IDC.
21.
21, yeah. Right at the bottom.
Okay, let's keep going.
I guess the only comment I would make is unless you guys feel different, I would say chapters no, because they're completely separate and they're not part of our IDC rate, right? Yeah, I don't think chapters.
Well, I mean, unless. Right, like. I'm just trying to contemplate a situation where they would be getting IDC.
Well, that's what I'm saying, they're separate, so I don't. And anything we send them from an external fund source would be a pass through anyway, and it would be excluded.
Yeah,
So I don't think chapters, unless you guys feel differently.
see a reason to put any chapter in. Okay.
But I'll just leave the rest to. Okay. The OK branches, not chapters, great, thank you. Okay, I had a question on number 23, IDC rate base. Also known as the direct cost base, means the accumulation of nominations total direct costs. So why is it called IDC rate base and then you define it as a direct cost base? That just confused me.
So the direct cost is all of our federal expenditure, any federal expenditures we've spent directly for the federal program purpose. So take Head Start, for example, funds that were spent for the direct purpose of the grant, those are the direct cost base. And so we accumulate that in the base and then we take the indirect cost pool to get the rate. And the pool is all the admin stuff. So like part of my salary, I do stuff for the grants, I do stuff for the general fund. Part of his salary, part of their salary. So
Is it okay if I put direct cost base just in lowercase? Is that a term of art?
yeah. Well,
Because it's not a defined term in the bin. I'm trying to capitalize all defined terms in the bin.
let's see. Oh, and it's not current, yeah.
Yeah, it's not, okay, so I'm just gonna put
But
lowercase.
if it has the same definition as this, then why wouldn't you?
Mr. McCabe commented again that this is typically federal money. So I can probably insert the word federal here, just to clarify. Okay. Page 6. He has nothing on page 6. Page 7.
I don't remember writing this much.
I
But yeah.
went to everything. Okay, the bottom of page 7. He is asking at the very bottom, nomination chapters shall report actual results to the AFC. And Mr. McCabe says, should this include actual chapter expenditure reports compared to chapter budgets?
This is the performance, not the budget. Right? Because they report the financials to ASC and the Office of the Auditor General. All right.
Yeah, I may have put a little mark in the wrong place.
Oh, I'm sorry, that you meant that to go somewhere else.
No, I think the general comment is, I know the question got asked, should, chapters automatically don't revert, you know that. But should there be a reporting process, meaning, should we have an understanding? If we give them 4 million for chapter stipends and they don't spend it, should there be an understanding on our end that there be some kind of carry forward? It really came out of the 3 branch chief meeting. That's why I brought it up. If we don't want to do anything with it, I'm fine. That's really why I got asked.
Almost like a personal life savings fund for unfilled chapter petitions.
Yeah, that was what got brought up, and I just thought, let me raise a question and see what happens.
Mr. Goodall.
Vice Chair Slater, members of the BNF committee, explaining further regarding Mr. McCabe's question. As you said, Vice Chair Slater, this piece of it is simply the budget form 2 stuff. And as it reads, the purpose of the administrative service centers in DCD is to work exclusively with all 110 chapters. So they carry out this function. And what Mr. McCabe is referring to is ASCs and DCD also work with the chapters on all of their expenditure reports. And that's captured elsewhere in the BIM under the chapter budget policies and budgeting information. So I think he has a good point, but I think it's already it's already covered. Just what is lacking, to be frank about it now, is even though I think that information is collected by ASCs, I don't know how far they go with it, meaning I haven't seen it distributed or disseminated like Mr. McCabe is getting to the entire government, right? We fund various entities and chapters, X amount of dollars to do Y kinds of things. We don't know if it's really going that way. In many cases. That's what he's pushing for, is a comprehensive way of doing that.
I think it's a good thing when you hopefully procure a new financial management system. And just having, in that dashboard. Oh, here's the chapter examples. Because right now, we have two different systems, we have our system and the web system. So. That's why they have to go and like, basically go to the chapters and get the numbers, verify things.
On that note, for the chapters. In their WIN system, under community development, it has their chapter balances. Each of the chapter budgeting, whether it's supplemental or any budgeting.
Yeah.
So it's captured in there. If it's not in the bin. Maybe a language should be included that every quarter. Chapter or to have those information.
Yeah, maybe it's not.
Yeah,
Isn't it a monthly reconcile
or a monthly.
or a month? Here, chapter budget procedures, page 137.
It might already be in there on the administrators.
Instead of monthly, please.
I think monthly might be a little too much for staff that chapter.
Well, like my chapter, like I only have one chapter that's fully staffed, so the ASC comes and like gets all this stuff from little, temporary staff who are acting like CSCs. Not getting paid as much. You guys need to fix that. Or help me fix it.
Because some.
Yeah, the posting of the monthly fund balance, it is a monthly reporting, it's not good procedure, monthly fund balance. And then ASC is supposed to do an online review of the budget. Yeah, that's right, temporary staff can't get access into it, so that's why the ASC people are coming to my chapters, but when you have a CSC, you're full staff, then they have access to submit that information. But getting that sort of communication into the rest of the government makes sense. Okay, let's keep going.
I could insert a reference to appendix L, right? That's the appendix. Could do that right here.
I don't design that, but does somebody else want to do it?
Appendix L is the budget, what you just read, the monthly reporting.
Just because, this is performance assessment, we don't need to have the two. They're in there.
Okay, I guess I'll move on to the next page, if that's all right. Okay, page 8, reports required by the Appropriations Act. Mr. McCabe asked, should we include language here that based on quarterly budgets compared to actual review budget revisions should be recommended by VFC? Should budget revisions be recommended by VFC? This is consistent with my message about quarterly analysis adjustments based on actual expenditures compared to revenues. Did I say that wrong?
No, and actually, I think I found it later through the budget revision documentation,
Oh,
so
okay.
I guess I'm just trying to formally establish a quarterly review of BFC on budget to actuals where we can actually assess revenues. Are we still on track? Do we need to revise? But it sounds like maybe there's already a process, 4 different things: budget revision, budget reallocation, or something.
It's actually in the Appropriations Act.
Yeah,
and it should
okay.
be restated here in the deck.
Okay, that's all I was trying to get.
Okay, the next page is.
Yeah, that's right.
I changed the LD 7, I got rid of LD 7.
Yeah, good.
Okay,
We're not gonna use it, right? Or-
yeah,
Yeah,
from your comments on the 26th.
How about 566?
but we're not gonna use, well, I wish, we're not gonna use it for budgeting, we'll still use it for accounting. Cause we have to.
But it'll be out of the field, okay. Okay, page 9 is the chart, page 10, on IDC recovery and allocations. Mr. McKay, maybe add language that this is in the annual IDC negotiated rate and changes from year to year. I can do that.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make the general comment that as OMB knows, our rate changes every year. You guys all know that too, so.
Well, this bin is just for FY
Oh, okay. Yeah,
24, so,
just the general comment.
yeah, okay. I'm gonna, I guess I won't say it because, well, there's a lot of language in here that could apply year after year after year, but sometimes I'm focused just on FY 24.
That's,
Because we adopt a new bin every year. Okay. I'll just.
and I think one of the reasons I asked too is some questions came up in the 3 branch chief meeting in general. And it may have been just a misunderstanding of what the IDC was, but they were asking, how do you allocate that? And it's based on a rate, like, I mean, it's not something I think we consciously say, other than we applied the rate to this, area. So that's all the reason why I was trying to. Because sometimes there's questions that you guys know, like, I think President actually brought up, like, how do you get, can we take, how do you guys do that, but that IDC allocation? It's based on a rate, like we really don't.
When you're adding it to their general fund. Basically, in 24, I see that second column. That's a percentage based on how much we end up getting back. Because of what they expended. It's not something where it's like, oh, you get some IDC, you get some IDC, it's the formula, right? Yeah. Please.
Yes. Yeah.
I can insert.
Okay.
It's according to the negotiated rate for the fiscal year.
Yeah, because it will change and it'll affect them. What he's referring to, who gets what on the.
Great. I'll do that.
Yeah, what control is referring to at branch chiefs meeting, because 2 of the branch chiefs are new. They've never been through this before. They were looking at the IBC allocations and asking the questions he's saying, how is this done? How does OMB get this amount? And controller's office, E&F committee, even, etc. Well, there's a plan, a formula based on studies that are applied, prior expenditures and so on. And from that, a percentage is determined. And that percentage is applied to whatever we're hoping the recovery is going to be. In this case, 23.5 million. So that's how it's all figured. But what they were getting at is, can we take X amount of dollars from here and put it over there? And the answer is no. No, it's not discretionary in that sense. It's based on the plan and the agreement.
Right.
They understand that.
Well, they did eventually. Oh, yeah, you were there. You know what I'm talking about.
I think eventually they did, since they didn't speak about it any further.
It's taken me 2 years to understand IDC and I still don't understand it. I forgot to go back up to section 6 fund allocations up there in the middle of page 10. Could I get the fund type codes for all of these doodads under section 6? For example, the IDC recovery, what fund type code is that? I was thinking it was under one for general funds. But then someone said, no, actually Dana said, it's actually external funds, which is fund type code 6. Because I looked at the chart of fund type codes and it doesn't say, there's no column or row for IDC recovery. So I just thought it would be helpful to insert the fund type codes when we're talking about these funds. If that's not too much trouble.
Yeah, it's a little tricky though, because the funding is external. But the expenditures are general fund, then we reimburse the expenditure. Well, it's a little tricky. Both, yes. Yeah. Yeah, so that's.
You got IDC budget one. You're asking for the top line or something, what the code is? Or what do you?
I'll give you an example. Friday, a week ago. Our staff member who's in charge of doing budgets for us, gets that. She asked and said, what do I do? I was told by Speaker's office to use IDC. And so she's like, okay, I'm gonna use IDC. So what do I put down? Do I put one for general fund? Isn't IDC general fund? Or what do I do? And then I thought, that makes sense to me, because it is general fund money basically. But then it's external money too. So I don't know, I didn't told her, I probably told her the wrong. Well. Page 14. Let's see. General wage adjustment, Mr. McCabe asked, does this include available general fund, was that for overtime or GWA? Does this include?
Overtime.
Oh, I'm sorry, with respect to overtimes, does this include available general fund money or just funds from external sources? We need to look into overtime. Is it illegal if we fail to pay overtime?
So I made the general comment because I keep hearing. I'll get documents to my desk saying they're asking. To pay overtime from like last year. And I'm told that they didn't budget it, so they can't pay it, and I'm thinking. Man, are we breaking any laws not paying overtime? Because we still have to adhere to federal payroll laws. And I don't know if this is a process that we can fix so that. So that, you know, programs don't have to come back and say. We failed to budget for it, now we can't pay it, and we incurred it. And maybe that's a program function, meaning you need to manage the overtime better, but. One way or the other, if overtime is incurred. It's just not a good practice for us to hold it back because of a budget that wasn't there in the beginning or whatever, so. That's why I asked, like, is this general fund or is it also program? Because the programs will budget based on their grant agreement. And whether or not that grant agreement allows for overtime, I guess is. Per each program, but in the general fund. You know, I don't know how much we allow overtime budgeting, and when we don't. What's the mechanism to allow us to pay it so that we're not violating any laws? Without having to go back for a budget adjustment, that's basically what I'm asking. Because it has come to my attention, this is happening. People have asked me like, how come I can't pay my overtime? I'm like, well, pay it. They're like, well, there's no budget for it. I'm like, well. Now we could get ourselves in trouble if we don't. So that's kind of a general question. Sure.
So are you logged into the Zoom?
I'm logged into the Zoom, however, we have been in 2 years of those. I got knocked off and then I got back on.
What's your one called?
Pardon?
Is it called budget finance or what's the name?
Mine is just under my name and on the Zoom call.
Karen
So,
Thompson.
yeah.
But I don't see a light on here, so are we streaming or not?
We are streaming, I have a streaming and recording, however, when I got knocked back off. It made another individual, and I got back on, made another individual host.
So can folks, Mr. Rodis, are you on there? Can you hear us?
Mr. Chair, this is Mel. I can hear you now, but it was silent for several minutes, sir.
Well, okay,
So are you the host now?
he knows with the, I think is the host and I'm going to be co-host.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we lost internet over here because. Ms. Thompson. I saw her immediately notice her computer and. I knew you all realized. Sort of, well, it's great, there's no internet. These are IC version. Yeah, but I mean for streaming purposes.
What back on?
Okay, but I'm trying to find.
It's overtime.
Overtime and how we can go back and rectify people, yeah.
And maybe this
Talk
is,
about internal controls.
right, maybe this isn't a BIM issue, I just remember thinking. You know, it has come across my desk where they're asking, can we pay overtime from like last year? And I was asked the question like, well, why didn't we pay it in the first place? We're gonna get in trouble if we don't. And they say, well, the budget, or we didn't, something, we have to go back and figure, and I'm like, well, is there a process we can? I mean, because overtime, I know it's hard to budget for, but when it's incurred, it's not optional to pay it really, and we have to pay it. I mean, that's, yeah, so that's the reason why I brought that up. Yeah.
And then are we just gonna say afterwards? Sorry.
Oh, Mr. Vice Chair and committee members, adding on to Mr. McCabe's comments. First of all, this section we're looking at is drafted primarily by DPM. So they use it in the administration of their duties, functions, and so on, providing advice on personnel budget matters. So having said that, the question at the moment is overtime. But I would further say this, that holiday pay, merit pay, steps, and so on, from time to time, they're not paid in a timely way either, because it depends on the budgeted funds available to a particular program. But if they're approved pursuant to the personnel policies manual and so forth, then they are due and payable. Sometimes, however, it doesn't happen until the following year. So we see budget transfers sometimes that the most extreme one I've seen goes back about 3 years. Is that this particular program, they didn't get their merit pay or step increases because they didn't have the money. Until finally they were able to get the money together. So on this year's budget, because they're paying it now, although it was for a prior period, they would do a budget transfer. And if appropriate approval was necessary from the step bonus committee, then it is an obligation that the government, the program needs to fulfill. And so it's done.
That family services,
What's that?
was that family services,
Oh, I don't recall.
we were doing this with.
Yeah. From time to time, there's some like that appear. And my point is that it's not just overtime, it's other payments as well.
Thank you. Let me talk from the program standpoint. On these overtime payments, the first step is budget transfer. So this where Mr. Biel's office is, and he's the one that does the approval. So once it's approved, then it goes to Mr. McCabe's office for payment. So two gentlemen here is the one that is, or the gatekeepers, the overtime payments.
That it? Okay. What do you have any suggestions on fixing this issue or?
Well, again, it may not be a BIM issue, but it's definitely something we need to figure out because. With holiday and step increases, those aren't mandated by law. Well, holiday might be, but step increases, we can give them, those are discretionary. But in the case of overtime, man, if we don't pay it, we could get ourselves in trouble. So I'm just trying to figure out.
I mean, my immediate thought is you create some sort of fund
Cases.
that you can pay it out of. And the programs would reimburse it after they do a budget transfer.
Yeah, and that's why I'm kind of
The
thinking,
budget transfer would take a long time, but you still have to do a verification and like, you're extremely. Funding program, budget for overtime. There could be limitation or something.
and maybe that's a discussion outside of the BIM down the road, but we do need to address it. And the only reason why, as I was reading, I was thinking, man, I get these requests on my desk, like, can we pay this overtime? And really what we're doing is we're taking today's dollars and fulfilling yesterday's expenditures. And we kind of want to get out of that and then not get ourselves in trouble as well.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, our annual performance, employee performance evaluations mandatory.
If I can-
So that's your vision.
And then the program manager doesn't deal with when people don't get stipends. I've been hearing why.
That's a problem.
Yeah. Are you guys happy to move forward past this overtime subject?
I just got a comment. I think I've been bringing up a lot of these budget transfers. when I was the deputy division director, we did a lot of transfers. I got to the point where they disapprove a lot of them. That's it. We transfer some money from some projects that we were going. And then we transfer it to pay overtime or whatever. Then we don't have that money for project. And it's the way the transfer, we need to be able to make a budget specifically for overtime or whatever. And go from there. I don't think I can see.
Thank you. Sorry, Jared.
This is not on the subject, but it's 1 o'clock and some kids been here and we got a lady back there. Oh, name. Okay.
My name is Carly Antifer. I'm with the Net College, the legislative aid.
Okay.
We've got two controllers off.
No, I'm because these two individuals have been sitting in the budget and finance committee room all day and we're having them sit here through lunch and we didn't provide them lunch. What?
Do you want to adjourn?
Something needs to happen. We're talking about breaking laws right now.
I got
I
reserved.
mean, I can understand. Linda's off the site here. And we all probably had a snack before he came in, but that's my concern.
Well, committee members, I guess I want to raise an issue right now. That is, it is 12:48. We have to go.
Very low. 30 minutes. Probably 30 minutes.
Because I would hope you power through. No way to get lunch and all invisible together. Well, they're giving, it would be the impetus, it would be the stick that would get us through this. But I'll leave that to the committee. Do you want to break, let them go get some food, or just take everybody go get some water?
Not us, but they're the ones who give us an idea. It's up to you, if they want to take a break, I mean. Oh.
Okay, I want to make a decision. If you choose like the 3 or 5 most important things you need to go over, let's go over them real quick. Because we're moving too slow. A lot of these are just pontifications, we've got questions, but also it's the only things that are necessary for Wednesday, everything else we can deal with. Deal with it another time. Let's get this
Okay,
done.
we'll move to the next item, all the way on page 19. Mr. McCabe raised the same issue about UUSB restricted, so I don't think we need to go through that
You all right?
under grants. No, but it's good because we already done with that. Next page. Page 23, section 12, budget revision instructions. Mr. McCabe asks, what about new pay accounts? Legislature approving the grant should identify funding as multi-year and stipulate that these funds are restricted. Again, the same issue, restricted funds are a multi-year agreement. In the same issue in the context of a multi-year grant agreement. Then down on the bottom of page 23, type of budget revisions, we also asked, should 2 and 3 be done quarterly?
Yeah, those are just by kind of establishing again a quarterly review. We don't think we need to change anything, but
Okay.
yeah.
Should I add something in there?
You guys are getting
Top of page 24. Top of page 24. Suitcases, I'm not sure I understand this, which I scare you thought. Reimbursements, if the refund is a reimbursement to a general fund business unit, the money should go back into the general fund. Top of page 24.
So yeah, I I mean, I don't know if we need to change anything, maybe I can work with Dominic on this a little bit, and, I mean, I just didn't really understand what to put, but I don't think we need to change anything.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, okay. That's all I want for Mr. McKay's comments. Unless Mr. McKay has on the whole rest, the entire up to page 159 or something.
No, I actually read this, and I'm glad I did, because I didn't really understand what the BIM was before I started here, but I read the whole thing, and so, yeah.
So yeah, how fast should we be?
Your excuse, take an extra hour lunch.
Oh, yeah.
Overtime.
Overtime.
You're on leave now, right? So it's Friday either.
Oh, I won't be here next week. Yeah.
Oh, you're on me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought somebody did do an exhibit thing. Is there? We finish.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, committee members.
Oh,
That's a word. I'm gonna make a motion. Okay, there's a few things that you're gonna work through and add some more language, and we're gonna have a copy for that. Can we have it by Tuesday?
I already, decided I'm gonna have to be an officer for the week, and I'll do my very best to get it out by Monday.
Okay, because I mean, I feel like we've already done the vast majority of just a couple of things, so.
Yeah, it will take long. But I think having it ready and get it out Monday, so we can see it first thing, that gives plenty of time for people to see it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, they're not huge, changes, they're just.
I should mention two things. I took the definition section that was way in the back. And I just took it verbatim and put it in front. So the changes, the underline and strikers are just my little tweaks to the definitions. But I didn't show like straight through the whole back part and then we added to this. But it's the same thing that I just changed, put it in the front. Other thing is the definitions that were verbatim taken from the Appropriations Act, I deleted those. Because the Appropriations Act itself is attached to the BIM. And then I have that little statement that says at the beginning of definitions that says, in addition to those terms in the Appropriations Act, the following terms. So the terms in the BIM will supplement the defined terms in the Appropriations Act rather than being redundant and repetitive. So I just took those. So we've got them.
Yeah, that's exactly. Okay, so the chair developed this work session agenda and the item 4B was proposed amendments. So we've completed all the proposed amendments. And we're now at item 5, close of session with announcements adjournment. Do we have any announcements? Yeah, meeting, so we're no longer gonna be meeting in Topazile on Wednesday,
There's the right.
right?
Started over there at Choco Canyon, you know, so affected level of cancer. I wanted to help face to face with the work on the back road. Legislative or council.
What's that road number again? We hit it, right? 55, yeah, that's 45, yeah.
So I can't even talk with them like this. Kind of mad at
They won't meet with you,
They won't. They say it's better that.
or they won't meet with you.
Yeah, they're just.
Okay, okay. Well,
So and then over talking, there's a big, we're gonna be at, Municipal Health Clinic. And then they're having quite the 14-day chapter about who should be on the board. Everybody's kind of up in arms, so I don't wanna take you guys into that, environment where. So I left it alone and said, okay. But anyway, thanks for,
that's my specialty.
motion to adjourn, like, you're not for.
Okay, in motion to adjourn, we've made all of our announcements, 10 a.m. on the 12th, we'll consider the BIM legislation, so if you can be available then, we appreciate it. Yeah, you'll be remote. There was no director to talk about planning allocations or anything like that, so you guys have experienced keep things as they are right now. Thank you very much for your full attendance, and I'm sorry for meeting. It's French fry. I ran out of the house. And then next Thursday, I was told there was a nominee, but I don't think I have a calendar, so. There usually is always a.
Oh, maybe one request. For Mitchell. Can you tell me your boss to get on the air and, get on the radio and tell them that we're out of COVID and. Explain to the people what's going on, you know? Because, over in Rama, they still want to go virtual, but then some of the community members were in chapter, yeah. Make it clear to the public, you know, get on the radio and tell them, you know, this is what's going on.